Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Aaron Blade, and I'm the editor, creator, and producer of what you're watching right now, Blade Talk. If you are new here, welcome, and you found this presentation helpful, informative, do me a huge favor, hit that like button, do me an even greater favor, and subscribe to my channel. I always appreciate all the support that I am given. So, I did a presentation right before this one about the fall of Israel, and that garnered a lot of comments, questions, in my email about essentially what happened next. So here we are. Basically, we were homeless, right? And for anyone who has ever been without a home, you know just how devastating just that word homeless is, right? After the kingdom of Judah fell, we were homeless. But what happened next? Stay tuned to find out. All right. So, to get to the next part of this story, we need to go back to the back of the Bible, that is, where the pages are still crisp and unturned. There are two books that go very much unnoticed, right? They really should get more attention. And they are the books of Ezra and Nehemiah. Ezra and Nehemiah were born into a community that had been forcibly exiled from Judea after the destruction of the first temple. Okay, they lived in what was known as the Persian diaspora in 450 BCE. Okay, they both returned to Judea with a mission. Nehemiah came to rebuild the ruined city of Jerusalem, and Ezra came to rebuild the Jewish soul. Before we get into these two prophets, I find it necessary that we need to do a little background, okay, and what was happening. So after the exile, the Jewish community in Babylon again went into lockdown. It isolated itself in order to preserve its identity, also to, of course, prevent assimilation. Laws against intermarriage, which wasn't really a priority during while the kingdom of Judah was standing, were now being strictly enforced in Babylon. Okay? Judaism maintained itself with its sacred books and separate school of study. Okay, for 50 years, the Jewish people found themselves isolated, and they couldn't leave. Right, so for 50 years, they were essentially stuck in Babylon. All right, then a miracle happens. A Persian king named Cyrus the Great took control of the Babylonian throne. The Babylonian Empire collapsed, and thus the Persian Empire began. And this is where the book of Ezra starts. In 538 BCE, the new king Cyrus issues a decree. Okay? The Jews are free to go back to Judea. They're free to go home. They are free to rebuild their temple. And I'll pay for it. Right? Sounds very noble, admirable, right? Now, before you start jumping the gun and thinking that King Cyrus was this amazing, nice guy, right? It's important to know that he was getting something out of the deal. He wasn't doing this out of the kindness of his heart. So, by allowing the Jewish people to go home and rebuild their temple, he demands unconditional loyalty. Right? It gives King Cyrus a foothold in the area without sending one single troop. So basically he's saying that, yes, you all can go home and rebuild your temple at my expense. However, if there is a rebellion that needs to be put down in that region, I'm going to command you all to send your troops before I send my soldiers. If there is a war that takes place, you will assemble some troops and help me fight it. It's unconditional loyalty. Okay? So he's getting something out of it. Nevertheless, the idea of moving back home electrifies the Jewish exiles, right? Now, some of the Jewish exiles felt comfortable and chose to remain, right? However, 42,000 exiles leave a country that they lived in for 50 years and return to a land that was then called Yehud Medinata, Aramaic for the state of Judea, or Judah. When they arrive, they find an abandoned city whose walls are breached and collapsing. They get to work, right? And it takes 2 years just for the foundation of the next temple to be completed. It takes 2 years. The community gathers together regularly in celebration, right? The elders who knew King Solomon's temple weep with mixed emotions, right? Then, as luck would have it, King Cyrus dies in battle. A municipal governor, along with the local people known as Samaritans, used this opportunity to try to get the project stopped. According to Ezra, the Samaritans were a people who had moved in and filled the vacuum left by the Jewish exile, right? They were practicing a competing version of Judaism, and they had a temple of their own. They told the king of Persia, the new king of Persia, that Jerusalem is a rebellious city, harmful to kings and states. If this city is rebuilt and its walls are completed, you will no longer have any portion in the province of Judea. So the king gets the message, and the temple is forcibly halted. Another generation passes. Another guy named King Darius I takes the throne. The Jewish community restarts building the temple before they even get permission, right? Before they even get permission, they get to work and start building the temple again. Again, the Samaritans appeal to the new King Darius to stop the project. The new king checks the archives and discovers that, in fact, King Cyrus did commission and pay for the rebuilding of the Jewish temple. Okay, so essentially King Darius gives the green light and orders the tax treasury in Samaria to pay for the rest of the construction. Now, in 516 BCE, after 70 years in exile, and 23 years after the start of the return from the exile, the second temple is completed. All the Israelites celebrate with joy. We have officially entered the Second Temple period. You might have noticed that at this point, even though we're talking about the book of Ezra, Ezra has yet to show up. So, to meet him, we need to skip ahead another 50 years. Okay? So 50 years after the Second Temple is finished, the new king of Persia asked a man known as Ezra, the scribe, to regulate Judah according to the laws of your God. Okay? The new community in Judea is frankly not doing well. Okay? Ezra is sent by the king of Persia to reestablish Jewish culture and create the local judicial system. Okay? He will be the new spiritual leader in Judea. So he is the first chief justice of the new nation. After a long journey to Judea, Ezra finds that many in the Jewish community, including the community leaders, have intermarried. Okay? This news is extremely traumatic for Ezra. He tears his clothes and goes into public mourning. He orders all the Jewish men to divorce their non-Jewish wives and expel them and their children from the community. Okay? Ezra was deeply concerned that Jews of Judea were violating divine law and that they would assimilate and essentially vanish into history. What's more is that the Persian Jewish community believed that God had destroyed the first temple for the sins of the people. Meaning the first temple was destroyed because of us. And if you ask most Jews, why was the first temple destroyed? Why was the second temple destroyed? Most religious Jews will say it was because of us. Right? So we just finished building the second temple. Ezra doesn't want this one destroyed as well. Okay? Ezra's book abruptly ends there. But don't worry. He will make another appearance in the book of Nehemiah. Okay? Nehemiah opens with the same king of Persia that Ezra left off on, Artaxerxes. Nehemiah is the king's wine steward, which is actually a title of high rank in any palace. Okay? One day, Nehemiah is talking to some Judeans who are visiting the palace and learns that the people of Judea are in really bad shape. He also learns that the city walls are vulnerable to attack, right? So we've built this amazing second temple, but we're vulnerable to anyone coming in and attacking, looting the temple, etc., right? So we asked the king of Persia if he can be made governor of Judea in order to take care of his people. The king allows it and sends Nehemiah to Judea with a letter that states to supply Nehemiah with all the lumber he might need for any project he deems necessary. Okay? He gets to Jerusalem and sees that the stories are all true. Okay? The temple is built, but the walls are breached and the gates destroyed from the Babylonian siege 130 years earlier. A volunteer workforce is assembled, and the walls are repaired in 52 days. With the city restored, Nehemiah addresses another quality of life issue: the debt. Nothing in life is free after all, right? So, as it turns out, there is a rich upper class in Judah, whereas the majority of Jews are poor and indebted to those rich upper class Jews, right? People have sold their fields and even sold themselves into bondage, all in hope of gaining relief, but the debts keep mounting. Okay? So what does Nehemiah do? He gathers the community all together, and this assembly, the poor vastly outnumber the rich. Are you surprised? Right? Nehemiah publicly shames the members of the upper class who indebted their brethren. One after another, Nehemiah has the lenders come forward and forgive the debts owed to them and return the people's fields to them. This is also where Ezra shows up in Nehemiah's book. The two work together, essentially, right? Ezra reads the Torah to the entire community from dawn to midday while the priests translate and explain. The people are completely overwhelmed with emotion and weep hearing the words of God. Ezra, Nehemiah, and the priest all explain that this is a day of celebration. There's no need to be sad. This is a day of celebration. 24 days later, Ezra again assembles the community and again reads the Torah to the people. The community leaders are inspired and sign a pledge that they will follow the Torah, they won't intermarry, etc., etc. Nehemiah continues his work. Though Jerusalem's walls are rebuilt, the city inside is still mostly ruined. Okay? Many Jews are living in the countryside. Okay? They're not even within the city limits. They're living out in the countryside. Nehemiah orders and forcibly moves 1 out of every 10 Judeans back to the city. Okay? So he comes across the same problem that Ezra had been struggling with. The community continues to intermarry, and now their children don't even know how to speak Hebrew. Nehemiah begins criticizing the men who have taken on non-Jewish wives. Nehemiah ends his book with a prayer to God. He states, "I purified the priesthood and the people and established the temple service." He's essentially telling God, I did the best I could. Did all I could. Ezra is credited with adding new and important elements to Judaism. His gatherings of the community to read the Torah established a practice of publicly reading the Bible every Monday and Thursday morning, as well as every Shabbat afternoon. And of course, as we know later, the rabbis of the Talmud added a reading of to the Shabbat morning service, right? Ezra is also credited with creating the first great assembly, okay? And these were a group of individuals that were prophets, scholars, judges, that later became the Jewish Supreme Court during the Second Temple period, okay? So life was essentially good, right? We rebuilt the Second Temple and we were thriving again. Alas, no empire lasts forever. So we found that once the Roman Empire came, with their policies, their anti Semitism, and their brutality, the Second Temple would be destroyed. And thus begins another exile in which we are in today. So I find it fitting to tell the story of the Jewish people's history. So that way you can get a better understanding. My hope is you'll get a better understanding of the fact that differences among the Jewish people, divisions and whatnot, are not new. And in this presentation, my hope is you understand the role of the prophets, more specifically, right? You have Isaiah, right? A prophet sent to King Ahaz, and is basically advising King Ahaz that, God is with you. Just trust God. Believe God, trust God. And of course, King Ahaz, being the wicked king that he is, decides, no, the kingdom of Israel and Damascus are coming to take over my nation. I have to do something. So he makes a pact with the Assyrians. And the result was that the kingdom of Israel fell, right? Then, of course, King Ahaz dies, and his son takes the throne, King Hezekiah, and they essentially are granted peace, right? Because King Hezekiah, unlike King Ahaz, his father, he actually listened to the words of the prophet, right? So this is the role of the prophet, not to institute anything new, but to advise the kings, essentially. We look at the prophet Jeremiah and what was going on at his time. You see, he came after Isaiah and was the advisor to Zedekiah, right? And what ended up happening after the kingdom of Israel fell, right, was the kingdom of Judah boasted, right? They grew arrogant. They were proud. These are your brothers, and that nation fell, and the kingdom of Judah essentially arrogantly stating that, see, God is with us. We have the temple. Our nation is still standing. And the prophet Jeremiah was sent to let everyone know and try to humble the people. Because around the time of the prophet Jeremiah, there arose many other false prophets that were saying that, see, God is on our side. Nothing can defeat us. We are the true Jews, right? We can take on anyone. As long as we have the temple, God is on our side. And the prophet Jeremiah is saying no. No. As the wise King Solomon stated, pride comes before the fall. So when did it end up happening? You guessed it. The individuals that, we have the first temple, we have the temple, and, God is with us, and they mustered up some troops and incited a rebellion and whatnot, and thought that they could take on the Babylonian Empire. And it was a massacre. It was a massacre. We didn't stand a chance. It was light work. I don't even think they broke a sweat. So, the prophet Jeremiah instructs Zedekiah that this has been foretold. This has been prophesied. Don't even bother fighting it. Just let it happen. It's going to fall. The temple is going to fall. The nation is going to fall. And it did. And that's why I oftentimes equate it to the movements we have today. Right? A lot of times, you have the major movements: Reform, Conservative, Orthodox. You have the Orthodox that are saying to the Reform that you all aren't Jews, or the converts aren't Jews, you all aren't doing it right, we're the true Jews, we're the most authentic and whatnot. And I always remind my Orthodox brethren that pride comes before the fall. That's the same attitude that the kingdom of Judah had after the kingdom of Israel fell. So be careful. And again, I teach this so that you get a better understanding of the role of the prophets. Especially for the Christians and Muslims that don't understand our history. Right? The role of the prophet was to get us back to Torah. And if we don't come back to Torah, something is going to happen. Right? And so the second to the last book is Nehemiah, and he basically tells God, I reinstituted the priest and the temple, and I did the best I could. And then next, of course, the last prophet, the last book of the Bible is Malachi, right? The last prophet. And if you read the book of Malachi, you can tell very clearly that this is a goodbye. That Malachi is the last prophet, much to the chagrin of the Muslims. Malachi is the last prophet until the Mashiach comes. It's basically a farewell. Remember the laws of Moses, remember my statutes, my ordinances, etc., etc. And so it's to give a better understanding of why we can't accept Christianity with Jesus being a prophet, because Jesus essentially stated things that were against the Torah. No prophet ever spoke out against the Torah. The Torah is the foundation. And in fact, it's how we know that someone is a prophet. By what your message is and how it compares to the Torah. Right? So we could never believe in Jesus, who explicitly states in the Gospel of Luke that if someone comes to me and doesn't hate their mother, their father, their son, their daughter, and yes, even their own lives, such a person can't be my disciple. What prophet has ever stated such a thing that essentially goes against the Torah? From honoring your mother and your father to now, in order to follow Jesus, you have to hate them. Or cursing a fig tree just because you don't know that it's not the season for figs. And why we can't follow the Apostle Paul, because Paul essentially stated that the law was a curse, right? we're not under the law anymore. That's a violation, so of course we can't follow it. And as for Muhammad, as much as Muslims like to claim that Muhammad was the seal of the prophets, the last of the prophets, right? The last messenger sent to mankind. There are two issues here. One is this notion that the Torah that we have has been corrupted, right? Which, by the way, isn't even in the Quran. The Muslims are making this up. But of course they would have to in order to justify their religion, right? Nevertheless, in the Quran, chapter 5, verse 43, the Jews come and challenge Muhammad, and Muhammad tells them, this is from Muhammad, why are you coming to me when you have the Torah, when inside of it is the will of God? So Muhammad is essentially confirming the Torah. Now it is the Muslims that come and claim that the Torah has been corrupted. But again, this goes against the very verse in the Quran which states that no one can alter the words of God. No one. So they're going against their own scriptures. Moreover, the other issue is that Muhammad, a Muslim will be proud to tell you, could not read and could not write. So how could he know that our scriptures have been corrupted? I mean, in order to find out if the scriptures have been corrupted or what have you, don't you at least got to read it first? But he couldn't read. And again, as far as the Christians, well, Jesus is the end of the law. Have you read the law? Don't you think you should read it first? I mean, a lot of good stuff in there, Love your neighbor as you love yourself. Honor your mother and your father. Be honest in business transactions. Have good hygiene, etc., etc. These are the things that Jesus absolved you from. Okay. So anyway, these are the reasons that I go over the Jewish history, not just for my fellow Jews, but for the Christians and Muslims, and to hopefully, get people back to Torah, right? Come back to Torah. It never needed a sequel. And the age of prophecy has ended with Malachi being the last prophet. Now, that's not to say that the divine spark is gone. There are some individuals who may have a hint of, the prophecy in them and whatnot. But again, these are individuals that are trying to urge people to come back to Torah in a loving way. Come back to Torah. I personally believe that is God speaking through them. Just come back to Torah. All right? And that's what I'm trying to do on this channel, on this platform. Trying to convince Jews, come back to Torah. Christians, at least read Torah before you believe that Jesus saved you from it. And as far as the Muslims, again, read it before you think that it is corrupted. come back to Torah. That being said, if you found this presentation helpful and informative, do me a huge favor and hit that like button. Do me an even greater favor and subscribe to my channel. Always appreciate all the support that I am given. Be good to yourselves, be good to others, and until the next episode, you all take care.